Most people fear being alone. They think solitude means loneliness. But what if I told you being alone is one of the greatest superpowers you will ever have? When you learn to stand on your own, you stop waiting for validation. You stop needing permission. You stop chasing people who don't see your worth. Being alone isn't about isolation, it's about liberation. It's the moment you stop asking, "Who's going to save me?" and start saying, "I've got myself." That's when you become unshakable. The truth is, most women are taught to seek connection before confidence, to prioritize relationships over resilience. But when you master solitude, you discover something far more powerful than approval: clarity. You learn who you are, what you want, and what you will no longer tolerate. This isn't about building walls. It's about building strength, quiet, steady, unbreakable strength that comes from within. Because when you know how to stand alone, no one can ever take your power away. So today, let's talk about why being alone isn't your weakness, it's your secret weapon. Most people associate solitude with sadness or rejection, but the truth is, solitude is where your real strength is built. It's in those quiet, empty moments that you learn who you truly are, what you stand for, and what you're capable of without anyone else around to influence you. When you strip away the noise of other people's opinions, their expectations, their energy, and their constant presence, you meet yourself for the first time in a raw and powerful way. That meeting can be uncomfortable, even painful, because it forces you to confront the parts of yourself that you've ignored or hidden behind relationships, distractions, or busyness. But it's also the moment where growth begins, because strength isn't developed in comfort, it's developed in the stillness of solitude. When you are alone, you are not performing, you are not pretending. You are not molding yourself to fit into someone else's narrative, you are simply existing as you are. That is an incredibly rare and honest space to live in, especially in a world that constantly tells you that you're not enough unless you're partnered, surrounded, or validated. Solitude cuts through all that noise. It's a mirror, not the kind that reflects your appearance, but one that reflects your truth. It shows you where you're strong, where you're soft, and where you need to rebuild. Most people run from that mirror because it demands accountability. It asks, "Who are you when no one's watching?" And your answer to that question defines the kind of power you carry in the world. Strength built in solitude is different from the kind built in company. When you rely on others to hold you up, your stability depends on their presence. But when you learn to stand alone, your balance comes from within. That doesn't mean you don't value connection or relationships. It means you don't depend on them for your sense of identity or worth. You begin to realize that your power isn't borrowed, it's owned. Every time you sit in stillness and face the discomfort of being alone, you are reclaiming a piece of yourself that you once gave away. You start to trust your instincts more. You start to make decisions without overthinking what others might say. You stop settling for people, jobs, or situations that drain you just because you fear loneliness more than dissatisfaction. Solitude also sharpens your focus. When you're not constantly absorbing the emotions and expectations of others, you can finally hear your own voice clearly. You understand what you want and what you need to do to get there. You develop emotional independence, the kind of self-control and clarity that cannot be shaken by temporary setbacks or rejection. Because once you've learned to thrive alone, you stop fearing the loss of anything or anyone. You realize that peace doesn't come from who's next to you, but from how well you know and respect yourself. The people who fear solitude are the ones who haven't yet experienced its freedom. They think being alone means being unloved or forgotten, but it actually means being free from needing constant reassurance. It's the space where you learn to generate your own energy, your own confidence, and your own validation. That's why solitude reveals your true strength, because it's the only place where nothing else can hold you up but you. And when you can stand on that foundation, you become unbreakable, not because you're cold or detached, but because you finally understand that everything you were searching for in others was within you all along. Validation is one of the most addictive forms of approval we chase, often without even realizing it. From a young age, we're conditioned to look outward for confirmation that we're doing enough, being enough, achieving enough. We measure our worth by other people's reactions, the compliments, the attention, the applause, or even the simple acknowledgement that says, "You're doing well." But the danger in that is simple. When your sense of value depends on the outside world, your self-worth becomes fragile. It fluctuates with opinions, and it shatters the moment that validation disappears. Learning to live without it, to stand firm in your own confidence, is where real power begins. Validation from others feels good because it's immediate. It's like a temporary shot of confidence, a quick fix that makes you feel seen and appreciated. But just like any temporary high, it fades. The approval you get from someone else has an expiration date. The moment they change their tone, withdraw their attention, or stop showing up for you, you start questioning yourself again. That's because your confidence wasn't built on a solid foundation, it was built on borrowed belief. The moment you understand this, everything changes. You stop needing people to validate your beauty, your intelligence, your success, or your worthiness. You begin to define those things for yourself. There is nothing wrong with enjoying appreciation or recognition. We are human, we all want to be seen and valued, but there's a vast difference between enjoying validation and depending on it. When you depend on it, you're constantly adjusting who you are to please others, saying what they want to hear, doing what they expect, and becoming what they find acceptable. You shrink your truth to fit into their comfort zone. And in the process, you lose touch with the authentic parts of yourself that make you powerful. But when you root your confidence in self-respect, you no longer need to audition for acceptance. You walk into rooms with quiet certainty, not arrogance, but clarity. You don't need to prove anything because you already know your worth. Self-respect is the kind of validation that never fades. It's built through consistency, keeping your promises to yourself, setting boundaries, and refusing to compromise your values for temporary approval. Every time you honor your intuition, every time you walk away from something that doesn't align with who you are, you reinforce that inner respect, and that creates a kind of magnetic energy that people can feel. Ironically, when you stop chasing validation, you often attract more of it because confidence is contagious. People sense authenticity. They're drawn to those who are rooted, who don't need external applause to feel worthy. Learning to self-validate doesn't mean you become closed off or emotionless. It means you develop the emotional maturity to recognize that your value is not negotiable. You can appreciate feedback without depending on it. You can receive praise without needing it to define you. You can be loved without making that love your entire identity. That kind of independence is liberating. It allows you to give from fullness rather than emptiness, to show up in relationships as a whole person rather than someone seeking completion. When you build your confidence on self-respect, you can face criticism without crumbling and rejection without resentment. You stop taking everything personally because you understand that not everyone will see your light, and that's okay. The goal isn't to be universally approved of, it's to be internally aligned. Validation from others fades, but self-respect lasts forever because it's not dependent on circumstance. It's something no one can give you and no one can take away. It's the quiet strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are, even when the world forgets. There's a moment in every person's life when they realize that chasing people, their approval, their attention, their love never leads to fulfillment. It only leads to exhaustion. You keep giving pieces of yourself away, hoping someone will finally see your worth, when the truth is, that kind of pursuit always comes from lack. When you're chasing people, you're trying to fill a void that can only be filled from within. But the moment you stop chasing and start standing still in your purpose, everything shifts. You begin to attract what's meant for you, people, opportunities, and energy that match your strength instead of draining it. Chasing people is rooted in fear of rejection, of abandonment, of not being enough. You convince yourself that if you just prove your loyalty, your love, or your value, they'll stay. You pour into others hoping they'll see the good in you, and you mistake your effort for connection. But real connection doesn't require you to beg for it. It doesn't demand that you compromise your dignity or silence your needs just to be chosen. When you chase, you're saying, your approval is more important than my peace. But when you stop, you reclaim that power. You start to realize that the right people don't need convincing. They recognize your value the moment they meet it. The energy of chasing is desperate, and desperation repels what you truly want. It keeps you locked in a cycle of proving yourself instead of being yourself. You can't attract authenticity from a place of insecurity. The universe or life itself doesn't respond to neediness, it responds to clarity. When you become clear about who you are and what you deserve, your energy changes. You no longer beg for attention, you command respect. You stop waiting for people to choose you because you've already chosen yourself. That self-assuredness becomes magnetic. It's the difference between reaching out in lack and radiating from abundance. When you shift from chasing to attracting, you stop wasting your time on people who only value you when you're convenient. You stop over-explaining, over-giving, and overcompensating. You learn that not everyone who leaves your life is a loss. Some departures are divine redirection. The people who walk away often create the space for the ones who are truly aligned with your purpose to arrive. You begin to trust that you don't need to force anything meant for you. The things and people that belong in your life will never require you to shrink or chase. They'll meet you where you stand. Standing in purpose means you're guided by your values, not your fears. You no longer pursue validation. You pursue meaning. You make choices that align with your growth, even if that means walking alone for a while. That kind of independence might feel uncomfortable at first because it's unfamiliar, but it's also where you'll find your strength. You'll realize that every time you stopped chasing someone who couldn't meet you halfway, you made space for something better: peace, clarity, and genuine connection. When you live in your purpose, you attract people who are walking in theirs too. You won't have to explain your worth, it will be understood. You won't have to fight for love, it will flow naturally. You won't have to beg to be seen, you'll be recognized by those who see life through the same lens. That's the quiet power of no longer chasing. It's not about giving up on people, it's about giving yourself back to yourself. When you stop chasing people, you start attracting purpose, and everything that once felt out of reach begins to move toward you effortlessly because your energy finally matches your truth. Silence has a way of revealing truths that noise will always hide. Most people fear silence because it forces them to listen not to others, but to themselves. In a world that never stops talking, scrolling, or comparing, silence can feel like discomfort. But that discomfort is exactly where awareness begins. When you remove the constant distractions, you start hearing the things you've been avoiding: your thoughts, your doubts, your intuition, and your truth. It's in that quiet space where the strongest transformation happens, because you can finally separate what's real from what's just noise. The noise around us is constant opinions from others, expectations from society, endless conversations about who we should be and what we should want. It's a kind of chaos that keeps us from connecting with our inner compass. We become so used to outside voices guiding our decisions that we lose track of our own. Silence, however, clears the static. It allows your inner voice to rise above the noise. It's like turning down the volume on the world so you can finally hear your own heartbeat. And that voice, the one that's been waiting underneath all the chaos, will tell you everything you need to know: what's wrong, what's missing, what's next, and who you really are beneath all the layers you've built to fit in. Silence is uncomfortable because it's honest. When the world goes quiet, there's no one left to blame, distract, or impress. It's just you sitting with your truth, and sometimes that truth isn't easy to face. It might tell you that you're in the wrong relationship, that you've outgrown certain people, or that the life you're living isn't aligned with your purpose. But silence doesn't lie, it doesn't sugarcoat. It gives you clarity, the kind that can only come when you stop running from yourself, When you learn to sit in silence without needing to fill it, you build emotional discipline. You begin to find peace not from what's happening around you, but from what's happening within you. In that stillness, you begin to notice how much energy you waste trying to control or please others. You start seeing how often you ignore your instincts just to maintain harmony or avoid discomfort. Silence reminds you that strength isn't about being loud or constantly proving yourself. It's about being grounded, unshaken, even when the world demands your attention. You realize that quiet confidence speaks louder than any performance ever could. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself, because it's rooted in certainty, not insecurity. When you allow silence into your life, you start hearing your intuition again, that subtle but powerful inner guidance that's always been there. You begin to move more intentionally. You no longer react out of impulse or fear. You respond with clarity and purpose. That's how you begin to reclaim control over your energy. Instead of letting the world dictate how you feel, you learn to check in with yourself first. You begin to make space for reflection, for rest, for stillness, the things that modern life tells us we don't have time for but that we desperately need. Silence is not emptiness, it's alignment. It's where wisdom lives. It's where you reconnect with your strength and your purpose. You don't need noise to feel alive. You need presence. You need awareness. And you need the courage to sit with yourself long enough to hear what your soul has been trying to say all along. Because when you embrace silence, you stop running from truth and start walking in it. And that's where real power begins to form, quiet, steady, and unshakable. Being alone doesn't harden you, it refines you. The world often confuses solitude with coldness, as if choosing your own company means you've closed yourself off from love or connection. But the truth is, being alone doesn't make you hard, it makes you whole. When you learn to be comfortable in your own presence, you stop looking for others to fill the spaces that were never meant to be filled by anyone else. You realize that your peace, your joy, and your strength aren't found in other people, they're cultivated within you. Solitude becomes the space where you build emotional stability, self-awareness, and the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't depend on external validation. Being alone teaches you emotional independence. You learn to navigate your own emotions without needing someone to rescue you. You learn to comfort yourself when things fall apart and to celebrate yourself when things go right. You stop outsourcing your happiness to others because you understand that no one else is responsible for your inner world. That's not loneliness, that's maturity. Most people never reach that level because they're too afraid to sit in their own silence. They rush into relationships, friendships, or distractions just to avoid facing themselves. But when you can be alone and still feel at peace, you've reached a place of true strength. Solitude also gives you perspective. When you're constantly surrounded by others, you start absorbing their energy, their fears, and their opinions. It becomes easy to lose your sense of self in the noise. But when you step back and spend time alone, you begin to hear your own thoughts clearly. You gain clarity about what matters and what doesn't. You start setting boundaries not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You no longer tolerate situations that drain you, because you've learned that peace is more valuable than approval. That clarity creates balance, and that balance creates wholeness. Being alone doesn't make you emotionally detached, it helps you love better. When you know how to be whole by yourself, you no longer enter relationships out of need. You enter them out of choice. You don't seek someone to complete you. You seek someone to complement you. You stop expecting others to heal your wounds or validate your worth because you've already done that for yourself. And that changes the quality of every relationship you have. You begin to connect from a place of strength rather than insecurity. You love freely, but you don't lose yourself in love. You give deeply, but you don't drain yourself to do it. You understand that the healthiest relationships are built between two complete individuals, not two people trying to fix their brokenness through each other. Being alone also allows you to reconnect with purpose. It gives you the space to dream without distractions, to explore without pressure, and to rebuild yourself without judgment. In that solitude, you find creativity, discipline, and courage. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You realize that you can enjoy your own company, that your own energy is enough, and that you don't have to constantly seek something outside yourself to feel fulfilled. That's when you become unshakable. So being alone doesn't make you cold, it makes you centered. It teaches you to rely on your inner strength, to trust your intuition, and to find contentment in your own presence. The world may see solitude as isolation, but those who have mastered it know it's liberation. Because when you can stand fully in your own power, connected to your truth, you don't just survive on your own, you thrive. You become someone who doesn't need to be completed because you already are.